Hello everybody, welcome back to This Week in Solar. I am your host Aaron Nichols, the Research and Policy Specialist here at Exact Solar in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And today's episode is going to be a little bit longer than 5 minutes, just to warn you. I've designed today's episode to be an overview that you can send to friends and family that covers all of the anti-solar policies of the current administration since Inauguration Day in January in one place. Please enjoy. Now, ever since Inauguration Day, the Trump administration has taken a series of actions designed to make clean energy components more expensive and projects harder to build. And it's hard to remember all of it. I think when we're plugged into the news cycle, it can be easy to get angry about something and then forget it immediately, especially since so much is coming at us every day. I was personally having a conversation with a relative the other day, trying to remember everything this administration has done to slow down solar, and I had trouble with it. So, because of a post by Abby Hopper on LinkedIn, Abby Hopper is the CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association, and because I wanted a resource like this, I went ahead and created one. Now, in that post, Abby Hopper said, if you have been feeling like solar storage and wind are being targeted by this administration, that's because it's true. Since the passage of H.R. 1, there have been a litany of executive orders and regulatory actions designed to delay/complicate/undermine the very energy sources adding the most new power to our grid. So, like I said, I've decided to take today's episode to do a full recap of anti-solar actions the Trump administration has taken since January 20th. If I've missed anything, please let me know in the comments, and let's get into it. So, on January 20th, starting on his inauguration day, Trump signed 2 executive orders. The first was called Declaring a National Energy Emergency, and the second was Unleashing American Energy. The National Energy Emergency Order declared high energy prices and state-level climate policies a national security threat, and it gave federal agencies broad emergency powers to fast-track energy projects, bypass environmental reviews, and use eminent domain or the Defense Production Act to accelerate energy projects. The Unleashing American Energy Order revoked nearly every Biden-era climate and clean energy directive, halted the Inflation Reduction Act's funding, including for solar and EV programs, dismantled the social cost of carbon, and directed agencies to take back any rules that, quote, burden domestic energy development. Neither one of these executive orders on January 20th mentioned solar specifically, but they set the stage for this administration's policies by excluding solar and wind from the definition of energy. And in today's email, you can see the definition of energy that I pulled from that executive order itself. It's in that first section under January 20th. Then, on February 5th, the Trump administration froze funding for the EPA's $7 billion Solar for All program. This was part of a much larger funding freeze under the Unleashing American Energy Executive Order. Solar for All was designed to help low-income households go solar through grants and loans, and that would lower their electricity bills and free up much-needed money that they can use for things other than ever-rising electricity bills. Then, on April 8th, President Trump signed another executive order called Protecting American Energy from State Overreach. Again, this executive order omitted solar and wind from the list of energy-generating resources, and the executive order directed the Department of Justice to challenge and overturn state and local laws that impose climate-related restrictions on energy production. Moving on after that, we go to May 20th. That is when a anti-dumping and countervailing duties investigation that was started last year came into effect, and the U.S. International Trade Commission finalized a decision to impose steep anti-dumping and countervailing duties on solar cells and panels imported from Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. There's a much larger story here, and we did an episode on this back in May, which you can easily find. But the ruling from the International Trade Commission said that the U.S. solar industry has been unfairly harmed by cheap imports from these countries. The tariffs put in place range from 14% to over 3,500%, depending on the country and manufacturer. Then we came to July 4th. And the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed. Now, this act took a lot of incentives that helped Americans go solar and helped people develop large-scale solar and wind projects, and just repealed them, got rid of them entirely. That's including the residential tax credit, which was a 30% tax credit for homeowners considering solar, the commercial investment tax credit, which eliminated the tech-neutral ITC for businesses, schools, nonprofits, and other entities. There's the production tax credit, which was an incentive for people to produce power after the project was installed. The domestic content bonus credit, which was there to give an additional 10% tax incentive to anyone who used products made in the United States to build solar or wind projects. The low income and energy community adders, which were also 10% extra incentives for anyone who built solar and wind projects on land that either falls in low income areas or in places where fossil fuel industry had pulled out and left people without jobs. It also eliminated direct pay and transferability, which were incentives created by the Inflation Reduction Act that helped nonprofits and houses of worship and hospitals, municipalities, and tribes to go solar and receive tax credits as if they were for-profit entities. So all of those were incentives created by the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022. They were all repealed by the, quote, One Big Beautiful Bill. Then on July 7th, Donald Trump signed an executive order called Ending Market Distorting Subsidies for Unreliable Foreign-Controlled Energy Sources. This has to do with the fact that there were several Republican members of Congress who agreed to sign Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act only if he promised to make it harder for developers of clean energy projects to move those projects forward. So he signed the bill he signed the executive order days after the bill was passed. It directed the Treasury Department to terminate production and investment tax credits for clean electricity, and the Interior Department to strip away any, quote, regulatory preferential treatment for renewables compared to fossil fuels and nuclear. Then on July 17th, the Interior Department moved to act on that order and dismantle that regulatory favoritism. The new policy ended right-of-way and capacity fee discounts for renewable projects on certain types of federal land. It imposed extra political oversight by requiring the Secretary's office to review all approvals, and aligned with Trump's earlier order eliminating renewable tax credits. Then, on August 1st, at the beginning of this month, the Bureau of Land Management released guidance targeting solar and wind projects on federal land, citing the Department of the Interior's decision to, once again, end preferential treatment for unreliable subsidy-dependent wind and solar energy. They ended longstanding right-of-way and megawatt capacity fee discounts, which had helped lower costs for developers leasing public lands for renewable projects. On August 8th, the EPA officially moved to end solar for all, which was paused back in February and had gone through several lawsuits, had been briefly unfrozen. The EPA officially ended it. The EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, wrote a Twitter post saying that it was ended and called the program a boondoggle, and claimed that he was saving a huge amount of money for American taxpayers by ending the program. Then, on August 15th, the Treasury Department and the IRS issued Notice 2025-42, providing updated guidance on how renewable energy projects can qualify for investment tax credits as they're being phased out because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. So to recap, the HR1, the OBBB is the acronym, phased out renewable tax credits, but there's still a window for people to claim them. On August 15th, the Treasury Department tightened the rules to make it more difficult for clean energy developers to actually claim those credits. It eliminated the 5% safe harbor test and made it a requirement that project developers satisfy a physical work test so that they have begun construction on a project. It's all minutia of tax law that I'm not an expert on, but would be willing to point you in the right direction of an expert who can answer more about it if you're curious. And lastly, a couple days ago on August 18th, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that it will no longer support solar or wind projects on productive agricultural land, effectively ending the Rural Energy for America program, also known as REAP, and its support for solar farms, declaring that funding and loan guarantees will no longer be available for solar projects on agricultural land. That's a lot. It's been a long 7 months for anyone who works in the solar industry. Thankfully, there's a lot to be hopeful for and a lot to be excited about as we move into 2026. But for anyone who was previously wondering how this administration is affecting clean energy and how they're targeting clean energy, I think it's important to understand the way that these things get targeted through different policies. I hope you found today's episode helpful. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you shared it or left us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe. If you're watching anywhere, search This Week in Solar Substack on Google and put in your email and you will start receiving these every week. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It means the world. And I will see you next week.